Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabley, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. And welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast. Phil and Andrew back behind the mic. Everything behind me looks like a disaster area because my once nice, neat job of stacking gear behind me is now spread all across my office because we're in packing mode.
Why? What's
Well, we've mentioned Prepper Camp is coming up, and it's coming up very, very quickly.
It's kind of funny. Like Prepper Camp seems like when you think about Prepper Camp, and like we've talked about it quite a bit, and getting all the family and get your stuff on. Even me being single by myself, whatever. If I'm going by myself, if I was going to go, the fact that it's like, okay, you put it off and you're like, okay, I need to do this, this, and this during this week and all this crap. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, it's 2 weeks before. Okay, I need to look at my list that I made last year. Okay, do I need to add anything to it? Do I need to subtract anything? What worked, what didn't, blah, blah, blah. Figure out your logistics. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, and this is planning actually throughout the year, but then it's like, okay, it's a week before, or it's 2 weeks before. Now it's a week before. Now it's 4 days before. Now it's the day before, and you're like, oh crap! Like it does come up quick. It's crazy.
Well, and the crazy part is like this run up to Prepper Camp. A lot of people, maybe even some of the listeners at this point, don't realize like we start this in like November, December. Like I purchased the tickets. I purchased tickets for the two of us, even though you ended up not being able to make it this year. And for my wife and daughter, I purchased those literally like within 24 hours of them going on sale. And that was, I want to say November, December last year. And then like we contacted Orchard Lake immediately to make sure we could get a hold of the campsite that we had the previous year. And I want to say we had that fully paid up, and it's ours, it's reserved. I've got the confirmation numbers. That was all done before January 1st. So like this run up to Prepper Camp is like a 10-month thing where like you do so much work at the front end, getting everything in place, getting reservations made, figuring out who can make it, and then it kind of just dies for like 6-7 months because like there's nothing to do. We're just waiting. And then when we get really close, usually like 2-3 weeks, because, just because we're preppers doesn't mean we're always completely on the ball. We finally realize, oh, it's really, really close. And now it's time to figure out who's coming and who can make it and where's everybody going to be and who are we going to link up with. And like this year, we didn't even, like last year we did a couple, or was it last year? No, year before last, we did a couple promotional activities with the PBN crew. We didn't set up any of that this year. This is, in some ways, this has felt much more kind of thrown together at the last minute, I think. And I think a lot of that was just uncertainty because with the fuel costs going through the ceiling, that scared off a couple of people from making this drive because I've got a 650-mile drive to get up there and I hardly have the longest commute. So for people that are driving 800, 900 miles to make it to Prepper Camp, $5 gallon gas is terrifying.
Yeah, and the one thing that we didn't do this year that we've done every year is we didn't get Rick or Jane Austin on. Just with everything going on and just completely slipped my brain. I know I mentioned it a couple times, but just with me moving and getting new things all set up and the new work schedule and doing all, just getting everything pretty much good to go. You and I both kind of were like, hey, we forgot to do that because we've gotten them on but we'll have to get them on at the end of this. When it's over, when Prepper Camp is over with, we'll get them on and discuss. I would like to hear their feedback as far as this year. And you're there, you're going to be there, so you'll know, but I'll be kind of curious to see the feeling of it with people there, the amount of people, like if it shrank at all, if there's less people because of gas prices and just the economy, the way the economy's going, is it stopping people from traveling, like especially the distances? I had a 14-hour drive. So it's not stopping Uncle Randy or Aunt Doris, so they're going.
It's kind of a back and forth though, because like in past years, we've commented that over the last several years, with like, the pandemic, the toilet paper shortage, the economy going to hell in a handbasket, gas prices going through the ceiling, energy costs going through the ceiling, food prices going through the ceiling. The more things are, let's say, unfortunate in the world around us, the more people seem to be waking up to this idea that, prepping maybe not such a bad idea. And that drives attendance. Like we see, like the last several years, we've seen more and more and more new faces at Prepper Camp. Now, obviously, I can't remember all the hundreds of people that show up there, but like I've commented in the past, I'm like, with Prepper Camp, you kind of get, yes, Kyle, we are live. We kind of get a situation where, like, after a while, when you have been in this world long enough, you can figure out who's in the world and who's not. Like, you just learn to read people. It's the same way military veterans, police officers, first responders just kind of appraise a person really quickly and figure out that's one of my people or that's not. And it's 1,000 things I couldn't explain to you. It's the way they carry themselves, the way they talk, the way they do everything. It's the way they hold their mouth when they say certain words. But what I see at Prepper Camp the last couple of years is a lot more people that just don't seem like they belong. And I don't mean that in the guise of like, I'm a gatekeeper, if you don't belong, you shouldn't be here. But it's just people who are obviously very new to this lifestyle and this way of thinking. And that's been interesting to watch. Like, I was talking to Jordan Smith recently, and I mentioned a person who was in a class right in front of me, and she remembered that person because they stood out like a sore thumb. Like slacks, silk blouse, pearls, looked like they were going to an HOA meeting.
Yeah.
Or a PTA meeting. And they are sitting there with a notebook and a pen, taking notes and getting business cards and everything else. And I was just like, okay, this is the least likely person to show up at Prepper Camp. But we were happy to have him. Nobody gave him a hard time. Nobody was anything less than welcoming, because we just want people to be able to take care of themselves when things go bad. It's just kind of an interesting analogy to watch the demographic at Prepper Camp change over the last couple of years. And more what I call normal people keep showing up, which has been encouraging and interesting at the same time, because it's changed the feel of Prepper Camp. It has really turned over time from people who were like bought in, but maybe were looking for more information in a discipline they weren't familiar with, and now it's turning into people who see the need, but they are starting from zero. They have no knowledge, and it's changed the feel of Prepper Camp in the last couple of years, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, the more people who want to get into that mindset and who want to, well, how do I want to put this? The more people that basically wake up and they're sick of being a tool for the government, and yeah, the more people who just want to like get off help, like they want to be self-sufficient, I guess is what I want to say, and not have to take handouts from the government. Not to get out from under the thumb of the government, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The more people that wake up and do that, the better. For every person that does that, I think that it takes some kind of power away from the government, just because it's less people that they can control, and people are starting to wake up. They're getting smart, and this is helping them. The whole preparedness thing is more people. I think I'm hoping to see more people get into it than ever before, because of the fact of, hey, the economy it's sliding down. I mean, did you see the stock market last week?
Raise your hand if you have a 401k that is crying in the corner right now. Mine's actually not doing awful, because like I've always been very careful about making sure mine is extremely conservatively leveraged. But when the economy, when it nosed over, I lost a chunk before I managed to get things reprioritized where I could weather a storm, which is what we're going to deal with. But I mean, and I even tell people, I'm like, if your whole thing is like not total distrust of the government, of which I think a certain amount is, rational and healthy even. But like, if your whole concern is, I like to eat, I'm a big boy, I don't like missing meals. So when all hell breaks loose, I like to be able to still feed myself and feed my family and take care of things. then the thing I continue to point out to people is I'm like, I, in my lifetime, have been front row center stage to FEMA and many other state and federal agencies screwing up relief efforts. And that's not to say they don't do some good. It's debatable how much, but it is to say that I've seen a lot of dropped balls. And if the ball that gets dropped happens to be the ball you are relying on to eat, then that would be your engraved invitation to realize that trusting your own preparedness always trumps trusting somebody else. It doesn't matter if it's the government, your neighbor, the local soup kitchen. Like, having food in your pantry is always preferable to waiting for a handout to feed your family. I don't
Right.
know about everybody else. I am not wired to listen to my wife and daughter, like, not complain, but say that they're hungry because I failed to plan ahead. That's not something I'm prepared to tolerate. So I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I can care for my family in a time of emergency. And you know what? I've had my moments to be tested. It wasn't fun, but we made it. None of us missed a meal.
Yeah. No, I just want to throw this out there. As of right now, the year to date, my 401k is down 20.3%.
Oh, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
Andrew.
I'm looking at the graph, and it's like it's yeah. Over the last like little bit, it's like it was going up, it was up, and now it just was like meh, like it's a cliff and it's down. But I mean, and that's me compared to other people. I know other people are they're hurting even worse. Like it's hitting them way less or way more, sorry, than me. Just because of how much they've been invested and all that stuff and the amount of years worked and all that. But yeah, that being said, it's if you're making out to prepper camp, I know we're doing this live on Sunday the 18th, but this will be you'll be listening to this hopefully on the road maybe while you're going to prepper camp. So if you're going, awesome. I commend you, applaud you, pat you on the back. Wish I was going, but this year just couldn't make it. Say hi to Phil for me. But hopefully next year you'll go again, and hopefully we're still around. All of us are still around next year or the event, and if we're not shooting, what can't say that we're not
I
going
will.
at Tommy a-holes.
I will say this much, that this whole conversation about 401ks and everything has got me thinking, if anybody out there knows someone who is a like professional financial planner, of which I'm not, I know more than the average person, but it's not my stated profession, not my area of concentration. But if anybody knows one, that'd be an interesting guest to have on right about now. Because, like I've always said, if you have like MREs lining the walls of your house and crates of ammo stacked up 6 feet high, but you don't have a 401k, then you kind of missing an aspect here. Like, as much as I think things are bad and going to get worse, you should also be planning for what happens if the world doesn't end. And most of us are not going to work, that much past about. None of us are going to work that much past about our late 60s. Sooner or later, you're going to want to take a break. So, being able to have a little nest egg to retire on is another prep.
Yeah, exactly. So
If only we could get things back on track right about now.
Yeah, right. No, so
Somebody just commented they know a few great financial planners. If any of them are willing to come on to the podcast and talk to a couple of complete knucklehead conspiracy theorists, I would love to pick their brain in front of the audience. Because, like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like 401ks and savings plans and retirement annuities. Those are not things that are, I want to say, universal, but that's pretty ubiquitous across the spectrum. Like, a lot of people have some kind of a plan, a long-term plan for when they eventually retire. And if part of that plan is a 401k, oh my God, is now a bad time to live. Like, Andrew, my heart kind of, I get a cringe when I hear 20% loss. I dropped about 2.5% before I got things quickly under control. But I will be the first to admit, like, my 401k is it was intentionally structured in a way to kind of stave off these big drops.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
know.
might have left a little meat on the bone when the economy was really firing on all eight cylinders, but it was very carefully crafted to make sure that if this happened, I wasn't going to take it in the teeth as bad as some did.
Yeah, no, I know nothing about investing. I know at work I get a 401k, and then I'm like, okay, cool, I signed up for it. That's all. But but no, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Unfortunately, I have a feeling that it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And especially if you look over at like Europe and stuff like that, what's kind of going on with their energy crisis and everything. And I mean, look at California, because like California is having an energy crisis already. I mean, as of now, like I mean, they were telling their people, which I you got to laugh at it, because they in one sentence they're like, hey, we're banning all sales of new sales of gas vehicles, oil, anything that uses gas or whatever. Yeah, we're banning all those sales. We're going to start phasing them out. You're going to start having to get electric. Jump to a day or so, maybe a week later.
Two
So
days later.
yeah,
Two
now they're,
days later.
hey, we're having an energy crisis, so don't run your AC, don't do this, don't, they're basically, and they're having rolling brownouts, blackouts, stuff like that. So, and then what's funny is I've been seeing pictures of people, and if they're staged very well, but I don't think they are. People using generators to charge their car.
Those generators are little nuclear generators, right? Clean energy.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
they wouldn't be gas powered generators charging an electric car,
Yeah.
right?
It's comical.
Especially when you consider the fact that the emissions package on a typical gas powered generator is zero. It is a pipe that comes out of the exhaust port through a tiny little muffler like you get on a chainsaw and then directly into the atmosphere. And it's just hello hydrocarbons to the atmosphere.
Right.
And if you have a vehicle that was made in the last 10 years and the catalytic converter's functioning, there's no check engine light. Other than the carbon monoxide, the stuff coming out of the tailpipe in most major metro areas like Los Angeles or Chicago, the stuff coming out of the tailpipe is actually cleaner and has less pollutants than what went into the engine in the first place. So the idea that we're actually going to use gas powered generators in emergency to charge up electric vehicles, to me, is just personally hilarious. Like, irony doesn't even begin to cover how much I cackle when I see those. And like you said, if they're staged, I mean, well played, but still.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that all plays out. But yeah, it just preparedness is something that I mean we should all be doing. And honestly, that kind of leads us into our main topic for the day,
Google disagrees with you.
right? The fact checker, Phil, disagrees.
No,
Fucking
not
pointless.
me. I am just a bystander in this discussion. Like, I was Googling, as I do sometimes, and I came across an article that was extolling how prepping was pointless. And I read it, and I mean, I'm bought in. I'm going to sell my guns. I'm going to sell all my emergency food. I'm going to dump all the emergency water down the drain, empty out my 401k and my savings account, go buy a big old boat or something. I mean, there's no point in prepping. What's the point?
Agreed.
Agreed. That's the end of the show, guys. Good night.
Yeah, the idea. It's funny because I mean, I guess I should have had you shoot me that. I should have had you shoot me that link so I could read the article as well. I didn't even think about it until like this very second. But
There were several. It was
Yeah.
not just one. There was quite a few of them.
yeah, so I'm kind of curious, Phil. What's in the articles that you read? What are some? Give us the bullet point.
Well, the main bullet
Government's
points.
gonna take care of us.
No. Actually, that was not listed as one of the things, which I think is indicative of the fact that the common man has like lost so much faith in government being able to care for the people, if they even have the will to. That's just off the table. But no, like I think it was interesting to me that like most of the reasons given for why prepping was pointless really directly analog to like the misconceptions about prepping. Like people kept talking about how if it was like an end of the world scenario, then there is almost no conceivable way to be prepped enough to outlive all of humanity. Like complete system breakdown, you go back to the 18th century, you have to live off the land. You need air, like you need property, you need heirloom seeds, you need animals to help you work the land. Like it was this idea that like what preppers are prepping for is doomsday, and there's no way to prep for doomsday. Everyone's going to die eventually. And I'm kind of like, okay, but that's not what most preppers are prepping for is doomsday. There was a lot of people talking about how preppers were worried about the zombie apocalypse, and that was never going to happen. Therefore, prepping was pointless. There were a lot of people talking about nuclear war, oddly enough, and they were like, okay, if Russia like flings a dozen nukes over over the Pacific at us, there's not going to be a country left to live in. You know what I'm saying? It's going to irradiate so much of the country, everyone's going to be dead in a matter of 6 months anyway. Once the system breaks down, everyone's going to die anyway. So what's the point? And that seemed to be the vein most of these people kept saying prepping is pointless in. And it was based on a lot of misconceptions about preppers. A lot of preppers are not, I mean, yeah, there are preppers out there that are prepping for doomsday. But there's a lot of preppers prepping for short term, medium term emergencies. Like, a blizzard knocks your town out for a week or two, or a hurricane flattens your town for a week, like I've been through recently. Or, I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, the 2 week lockdowns for COVID, for example. There's so many little instances where a short or midterm emergency came up where you needed less than 30 days of supplies to get by.
Mm-hmm.
And those are not scenarios in which prepping is pointless. Those are scenarios where prepping is just freaking common sense. But
Yeah.
I did find in all, and again, this was several articles I read, which kind of drove some of the talking points I have queued up. But I did see people who were saying this prepping for this is stupid, but prepping for these things is smart. And the things they were talking about are a lot of things we've talked about: blizzards, civil unrest, mobs roaming around your city, aka Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Like, natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, job loss. It was encouraging to me because I saw this mix where it was like, well, these are preppers, and preppers are doing this, and they're crazy because they're doing this for things that are never going to happen. But these things are not prepping, even though you and I say they are, and these things are not crazy. This is things everybody ought to be doing. So what frustrated me was, it's like, okay, how do I get you to understand that all these things you're saying are smart? This is also prepping. This is also prepping too. If you don't think these threats are ever realistically going to happen, then you just don't prep for those things. You prep for these things. But it's all prepping.
Right.
The only difference between me and the average person in South Louisiana with a box of hurricane snacks is I take things a little bit further than y'all did. But I've still got ways to keep my food cold. I've still got ways to keep my family somewhat comfortable. I've got a backup generator. I've got food. I've got water. I've got things put aside to mitigate problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when season comes around, we keep our vehicles gassed up. We're ready to evacuate at a moment's notice if we need to. I don't know a better way to say it. Like, the difference between me and everybody else, and Andrew and everybody else, is that we take things a little further than most of y'all do when it comes to being ready for an emergency. But that doesn't make it crazy or stupid or pointless. It just means we see the same threats most people do. We just see that they could be a lot worse.
Right. And the thing is, though, is I'm not a big fan of when someone's like, well, I'm prepping for tornadoes, or I'm prepping for, they pick one single thing, and that's their whole being of preparedness. And I would say in a way it's wrong. I mean, it's good that they're prepping. Like if you're just strictly, hey, I'm prepping for a hurricane. Me, if I'm like, hey, I'm prepping for winter. Well, winter right now, it's summer going into fall. There is no snow on the ground, so I don't need to be preparing for winter. the fact is you just preparing for life. I mean, if you prepare for one thing, like if you prepare for a hurricane or tornado, winter, whatever it is, and you're getting your food stores up, you're getting your winter or your water, your food, you're getting your shelter, your house, your shelter, whatever in order. Uh, you're getting everything, all your ducks in a row for just life. In case, like you're covered for a job loss, you're covered for a hurricane. You're unless you got to bug out. You're covered for a tornado unless a hurricane or tornado, whatever, flood. If it flattens your house, washes it away, and it's gone, then you're kind of returned to zero in a way. Which and you got to work on building all that stuff up. But build like, and that's why it always gets me when people are like, "Oh, well, are you preparing for the end of the world?" Well, no, but I'm preparing for life because life happens. Life is the biggest thing that we can prep for, and that's where like you just look at it and hey, I'm prepared. Like if I lost my job, I have some food set aside for a couple months that I can eat. I don't have to go to the grocery store. Yeah, it's something that's going to be bland kind of thing, like getting having to eat some of the same stuff over and over again, but I don't have to go grocery shopping. That's going to save me, say a couple $100 if you're a family and stuff like that or whatever. If you go to the store every week, I don't, but it saves me say $200 or $300 every month. Say,
The thing I usually reply to that when people ask, "Are you getting ready for the end of the world?" I tell them, "Yes, I am. I'm getting ready for the end of my world."
yeah,
Because like if let's say I lose my job, that doesn't affect my neighbor. That doesn't affect any of my neighbors. That affects me, my family, my little friend group, my extended family, people that care about us and our welfare. It affects them. It doesn't affect everybody else. So
mhm,
it's not the end of the world to the other tens of thousands of people who live in this town I live in. It's the end of my world
mhm,
because I now have serious financial hardship to weather. And those are moments where at least having the security of knowing I can't do anything about the bills, but I can do something about the grocery bill. I can do something about lessening the utility bills because I have water put back. I can raise the thermostat to minimize the electric bill. There's all these different things I can do to mitigate because I have things put in place that are mitigation strategies. So I always respond with, I'm not getting ready for the end of the world. I'm getting ready for the end of my world.
right,
When a Cat 4 hurricane smashes my house, a whole bunch of us had to eat the suck sandwich,
mhm,
but you didn't. I
right,
mean, you cared about us, but up in Michigan, it may as well have been an atomic bomb on Mars. It didn't matter. It didn't affect your life,
right. I
and
mean,
it didn't affect a lot of people in the country. So, was it the end of the world? Nope. But down here, this place looked like a war zone.
yeah.
So,
And that's where and that's where I tell people too is like I said, prepare for life. Prepare for something like you don't have to prepare for one big gigantic thing. You can just prepare for just everyday life, whatever life throws at you. Just prepare for something. And if you set like you don't have to set a bunch of stuff aside, but if you have 3 months of bills set aside and you lost your job, or something happened, say Michigan, we have a snowstorm or whatever, or you lost your job, snowstorm. I can't go to work for a couple of days because the roads are completely closed, or I can't go to work because I lost my job. I have money set aside to where I am covered. I have food set aside to where I'm covered. Like I could be okay for a few months, like and not have to stress too much because I'm prepared for life.
mhm.
But yeah, so no thoughts given to real world threats.
Let me front load this. I've got four bullet points, and this is when I'm saying prepping is pointless. Because I will happily admit, there are times prepping is absolutely 110% pointless. But it's not the things most people were talking about. It wasn't, well, the end of the world's never going to come, or the end of the world's something you can't live through anyway. But I'm going to tell you that there are four things I'm going to say. You do any of these four things apply to you? Prepping's pointless. Prepping is not going to help you. No thought given to real
Tell
world
you
threats. There are four things I'm going to say. You do any. I just heard an echo. I had to wait for it to
that
clear.
Sorry.
But yeah, if you don't give any thought to real world threats, if your entire perspective on prepping is I have to get ready for the zombie apocalypse, and Andrew and I have said before, if you prep to a sufficient degree for any one threat, you're prepping for kind of most of them. But if you don't give thought to real world problems, prepping is pointless. If your whole worldview, if your whole prepping journey is centered around Red Dawn and the Chinese falling out of the sky and I got to have MREs and bullets so I can defend the country. But that thing I was talking about earlier where you don't have a retirement strategy in case the world doesn't end and you get to age 70 and you can't retire because you don't have money put away, but you can't work anymore because you're too freaking old and sick. If you don't give thought to real world threats, prepping's pointless. Agree or disagree?
I mean,
Or let me rephrase it slightly. Mike is notorious for saying do your area study, right?
Mhm.
The reason he says do that is so that you realistically prepare for the threats you are likely to incur.
Mhm.
I am not going to typically spend a lot of time prepping for a blizzard.
Mhm.
Not because it's never snowed down here, but because it snows down here so infrequently, I better be ready for 10 big ass hurricanes before I ever get ready for one blizzard.
yeah, and I'll
So,
be ready for 0 hurricanes before 1 blizzard.
yeah.
Because I mean, what's funny is you get snow down there. I don't get hurricanes up here.
You keep talking, bud, because now I'm curious. I'm gonna Google that.
Has a hurricane ever formed on Lake Michigan? No.
Not formed
Uh,
on Lake Michigan, but I mean, hell, we had a
I mean,
tropical.
we get the after effects. Like we get a lot of the after effects from you guys. So I mean, you guys can't keep your crap down there. So we get.
We just like to share.
Yeah, right. No, I would say, especially like go off of like what Mike says. I mean, it's a perfect example. Do your area study, find out what threats are around you, as far as local threats. Find out. I mean, do you have gang members in your area? Do you have like? I mean, what are the local threats? Prepare for that. Prepare for your local threats. Your weather. Where do you live? Uh, prepare and prepare for that. I mean, and that makes prepping not pointless. What is pointless, and I do agree with you on that. I guess is what makes it pointless is, hey, I'm preparing for earthquakes, or even I guess I don't really want to say preparing for earthquakes because Michigan we have had earthquakes, uh, but hurricanes. I mean, that's a great example. Is I'm not going to prepare for a hurricane. If I was, and I was buying, I mean, I was buying all the stuff that you would for preparing for a hurricane. I yeah, I should be putting my money somewhere else and my time somewhere else that's going to benefit me when I get snowed in or a tornado hits. I mean, I guess that would be my hurricane in a way. I mean, that would be if a tornado hit. I guess that would be equivalent to in a way. Of you preparing for a hurricane. I mean, and you get tornadoes too, so you know.
Yeah, we do.
And
Unbalanced prepping. We've warned about this on numerous occasions. Too much focus in one area.
mhm.
I'm going to say the average person gets way too fixated on firearms, which I sympathize with. Firearms are cool. Firearms are fun.
Hurt my
Andrew
feelings.
wants all of them. Like he just wants to run an orphanage for little lost firearms where he can bring him in and keep him warm and give him a good home. But like there is a cautionary tale about having your preps be unbalanced and you put too much effort in any one area and the next thing you know, the one thing you didn't prep or you didn't put back or you didn't plan for is the one thing you're desperately going to need. And at that moment, like if you have enough food to live through the end of time, but you have no backup water source, guess how long the food's going to get you down the road? If you have enough bullets to
Food.
fight off the Chinese, but no friggin' food and water, you're not going to make it very far. if your preps get too far out of balance, the weakest link in the chain becomes the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things you did in the other areas don't matter anymore. It's going to be really cool for whoever rolls you up and takes your stuff, but it's not going to help you.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing though too, is you got to look at your situation, because a lot of people they can't necessarily. So what I have, I mean, I have guns, I got ammo. I am starting to, since I moved and stuff, I did leave a lot of food and stuff that I didn't even want to. It was that discussion that I didn't want to have with the roommates when I left. And okay,
Who's?
what's your stuff? What's my stuff? So I just said screw it, and I left a crap ton. I left a lot of stuff. So I'm working on building my food stores back up. I am doing what I took at your example for water storage, and I've been every time I empty out a 2 liter is what I've been using. 2 liters. That I've been washing them out, filling them with water, putting them downstairs in the basement on a shelf. Like I got like 4 2 liters now. 5 actually. It'll be 6 here soon. So I mean, and that right there, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if a pipe breaks, not only do I have bottled water, I don't know how many cases of bottled water, but I have that stuff too that I could use and rely on. But like what you said, the food stores, if you have a lot of ammo, that doesn't really do any good when you're starving, unless, I mean, you could go out and take what you need, but then you're risking a lot. But if you don't balance the food and water kind of thing, the water goes really quick, especially when you're having to use it to make the food. So keep that in mind too. So like every time you go and you buy a bucket of Mountain House, you need to make sure you have the water available to make that bucket of Mountain House.
And a way to heat it.
Yeah. And so
I like to play this with new preppers, this game, where I say I get to turn stuff off. And I ask them, like, okay, walk me through your morning routine. And they're like, oh, well, I make coffee. I'm like, okay, I just turned off your main breaker. How do you make coffee? Oh, well, I put a pot on the stove and I boil the water. I just turned your gas. Does that stove run on electricity? Oh, well, you're right back where you started. It's a fun game to play to get somebody to start thinking about, how do I truly bypass all these problems? So it's like you said, if you don't have water, if you don't have a way to cook, if you don't have a way to heat water, if you don't have all these things, the weak link becomes the one that breaks the whole chain.
Well, I mean, and the saying 2 is 1, 1 is none applies across the board in multiple aspects. If you have multiple ways, if you have 2 ways of making said coffee and 2 different ways at that, then that's better than the one way that when your power goes out and you run on an electric range like I do, that right there, like, okay, well, I can't make coffee because my coffee maker's out, the electric's out, so that took away 2 things that I would probably use. However, I have, but then I have other things that I can rely on that's gas operated. So yeah, 2 is 1, 1 is done. Keep that in mind when you're prepping. Keep that in mind when you're stocking stuff. It's a good thing to think of, especially if you're trying to make like a bug out bag or get home bag or anything like that. I mean, keep that in mind. It sucks. Like, it's funny when you pull out a lot of stuff and you're like, well, I got this way of making fire. I got this way of making fire. Okay, well, why don't you use a Bic lighter? Well, that runs on fuel and that could run out. So I have a Bic lighter. I have matches. I have flint and steel or whatever. I mean, I have like 5-6 different ways of making fire, and it may seem overkill, but I don't want to be stuck out in the woods when I want fire and I can't make it, because I was like, man, 2 things are awesome: matches and a lighter. That's all I need. But so yeah, I mean, just think about it that way. And I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, no, I agree.
Well, since you're dovetailing us so nicely along, gadgets with no real use.
Ooh.
Everyone listening to this podcast at one point or the other has seen a cool gadget and thought they couldn't.
Terrible for this. I said Instagram is like, it's awesome for seeing gadgets. Because you have the influencers that are like giving stuff, and they're like, and the company's like, hey, promote this. Okay, cool. You paid me. I'm going to do it. And then you see like these gadgets and you see things, especially you see a lot of stuff in for camping and stuff like that. But I've been seeing a lot with firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Company will come up with something that, hey, this looks cool. And then you'll see ad after ad after ad after ad. You'll see a review on it maybe somewhere. Hey, this is cool. This works great. And you look at it, you're like, this serves no purpose. And I want to throw it out there. The one thing that I saw is it's a hanger that you can put on your plate carrier, basically, and it's a mechanism that attaches to your rifle, and it lets you hang your rifle on that mechanism so that you can transition to a pistol.
They call those slings where I come from.
Yeah, this is they're promoting it like, hey, sick of your sling getting caught up on this, and this, and your gear and all this crap. Use this hooker. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like in the video, it made it look really cool in the video. But I'm looking at that, I'm like, the first time that person gets shot back at and they want to go drop, and they need to go. Good luck finding that little spot on that, that hanger to hang that on in a oh crap situation where I need to like get a gun up. Yeah, no, it's okay. But that was the last really big thing that I saw that I laughed at, and I was like, oh, I should get this just to like play a joke on Phil. But then I was like, I don't want to spend my money on it. I'd rather go buy food and stock it up.
But see, okay, sidebar to talk about what you brought up. Things like that, I'm convinced, were invented by people with very little real world tactical experience. Because if you happen to be a person that believes in owning and wearing kit, then you should have taken the time to make sure all your kit works together. And I know from experience that my slings are configured that if I am in a shooting stance with a rifle and I just take my hands off the thing, it is going to drop square against my midsection, far enough out of the way that I have no problem at all going for my sidearm and presenting. I'm assuming this thing was like hung off the right, like basically off the right shoulder strap, right?
No, this was so the video I saw, it was hung in the center. So like right where a mag would go, it was
Where's the barrel, Andrew?
I mean, pointing down.
Pointing down. Most of your firearms users are male, right? And the ones that aren't male still have things at about their center line, about just slightly below the waist, that don't react well or play well when they get hit with a piece of steel, especially if it's hot. So any carry solution that involves putting the barrel, or God forbid a silencer, literally on top of your genitalia is a stupid idea thought up by a stupid person with no tactical experience, no gun handling experience, and they should be slapped. And I swear to God, if the person who invented that thing is like a Delta SEAL operator, you come on the show and tell me how stupid I am and how I just don't see your brilliance, or tell me that your Instagram model misused or misrepresented the product, but don't try to convince me that's a smart idea. Because the minute you have to maneuver, run, or reposition with this hot barrel sticking you in the unmentionables, I'm going to tell you, you're going to realize a sling would have been a lot better idea. And anybody out there that says, oh, well, with a sling, the barrel could still hit you where it's not supposed to. And I'm like, yeah, but with a sling, I still have the option to maneuver the firearm, which means with my non-shooting hand, I can tuck it to my left side so it's not sticking me in the jewels and the thighs and the kneecaps and everything else while I'm running for my life. Whereas if it's literally hooked to the front of your plate carrier, you get to eat it.
Yeah.
So gadgets with no real use. Things that look really cool on Instagram when you're running a slick plate carrier and you've practiced this movement to hook it onto that hook like 20,000 times to get it right on the first try, or better yet, it took you 10 takes to get it once. And that's how media works. The one time you get it right is the one time it ends up not hitting the cutting room floor. Those are things that just don't make sense. And that's one example. That's firearms. Let's talk about the myriad of camping equipment out there, or supposed survival equipment that might have a supposed use, but it just doesn't freaking work. let's talk about the number of stoves out there that like they leak gas, the starters don't work, they fall apart after 2 or 3 uses because they're cheaply made Chinesium junk from China. Let's talk about all the ferro rods out there that when you look at it on Instagram, it makes a fireball this big and starts a fire on the first try, but when you actually get out of the package to try to use it, it's like a friggin' mouse with asthma breathing on the fire trying to get it lit. Let's talk about let's talk about clothing items. Pants that fall apart after a couple of hard uses, boots that friggin' make your feet hurt, socks that make your feet turn into prunes because they don't wick the moisture away. Like, you could go on this subject for hours, but it's not just gadgets that just don't make sense. It's just gadgets that don't work. It's stuff that looked fun and sounded cool in theory, but in a real world survival situation, it has no function. It does not work. It doesn't help. And the only thing it helped was it helped somebody else make money and it would lighten your wallet.
It
Which
we like to call that the good idea fairy.
the good idea, fairy.
Yeah, the good idea fairy. She pokes her head up and is like, "Hey, this is cool. This is a good idea." And everything sounds, in theory, everything sounds like a good idea. But in practice, and that's why you and I, and I mean, and that's why you hear just a lot of people, like different podcasters. I mean, you hear people preach, use your gear, test it out. If you see something online and you're like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. Like in theory, this looks really cool. This looks like it could actually work really well for this need that I need. Like this pocket that I have that's empty, this looks really cool. And I think this is going to fit it. And it's serving me a purpose. I mean, if you want to buy it, buy it. But don't be disappointed if you get it and it does not perform at all with your expectations and what happened online and all that crap. Don't be disappointed. Use it, and then if it does perform to the standards of for you, put it in your rotation of stuff. Put it in your kit. But if it doesn't, hey, eat the loss, discard it, throw it, and move on and find something that does work. Because that's the thing, is the most important thing is training with it and get it, use it. Because if you got it, what is it? Glenn Tate, 299 days. Like his one character, the podiatrist character that he has in that book. Spoiler alert! If anybody's listening to Glenn Tate's books right now and they're not at this part, sorry, not sorry. But this dude, I mean, they're all out there surviving. This guy shows up at his cabin and he has all of this equipment, but it's all in the packages. And he gets mad at the main character because he preaches how, oh, hey, like I don't need, like he gets mad at him because he uses the stuff and he vets it and like he tests it out and he doesn't need the most expensive stuff because this, you need to make a fire. And I have 2 lighters, a Bic lighter, which is freaking cheap, or I'm going to give you like this $500 lighter that sparks across the 2 nodes and makes electricity look and stuff like that. At the end of the day, they make fire and they work. However, the one that say is $500 is $500, and then the Bic lighter, you can buy a pack. You can buy a lot of Bic lighters for $500. Or you can buy the pack of 5 or 10 or whatever, and then you can put the $490 that you have left over, if not more, to something else.
Pro tip, I like the mini Bics.
Yeah.
Even though they don't last very long, but like you could get a big bulk pack of the mini Bics for freaking nothing, and they take up no space. And like you could literally, any little compartment, any little Altoids can or whatever you have in your prepping gear, you could just throw 4, 5, or 6 in there. And we always say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Well, if you've got 6 mini Bics, if 3 of the stupid things, all the gas leaks out of them, you still got 3. And that is at a bare minimum 3 fires you can start. Even though I'm going to tell you they'll work for more than just 3 fire, 1 fire each.
Yeah.
But like it's And this is something Joe Adkins said years ago. Joe teaches, or I don't know if he still does. He used to teach primitive survival and bushcraft, and he always used to tell me that when he gets to the fire starting part of this, I mean, he'll show his students how to use a ferro rod. He'll show them how to like rub two sticks together, how to make a bow drill. He'll show them all that stuff, and then he makes them all try to start a fire using all the techniques he showed them. And he said, usually I'll get one person out of the class manage to get some smoke starting because it's hard to make that work. And then he tells every last one of them, how many of you have a lighter in your pocket? And he says, the answer should be all of you. Because he said, knowing how to make a bow drill, knowing how to use a ferro rod, that's great. But a Bic lighter is too daggum cheap and it works too well for you to just not have that available to you. So, yeah, the ferro rod and all the bushcraft skills, it's all cool and it's fun, and it could come in really handy at a moment of need. But like you can't overlook the basic. I got a Bic, and you do this, and fire comes out of the end of it. Like have some common sense. I guess for me, I always go back to this idea that like if you work backwards to the gear. You start with, this is the problem. What do I need to mitigate the problem? And then I arrive at this point of, this is the thing that fits my budget that mitigates the problem. I feel like if you do that consistently, you avoid a lot of this. But like you said, you have to test your gear. You remember a couple years ago, I think it was Recon Tactical started selling very cat-like tourniquets, we'll say. I think I think North American Rescue actually put them out of business because they were too cat-like and they couldn't keep selling them. But like I bought a couple because I had it on good authority from somebody I trust in the medical field that they seemed legit. And I did what I would normally do with something I expect to be a life-saving device. I took and strapped that thing around the 4x4 table leg of my workbench. And I turned the windlass until I physically couldn't twist it any harder. I'm a 6 foot tall, 250-pound boy. I got big arms. And I was wrapping this thing around a 4x4 wooden post. And I couldn't break the windlass. And nothing shredded and nothing came unstitched. But I was not even about for a moment to consider relying on one of those things in a life or death situation until I had literally tried to test one to destruction. And that's what I encourage everybody to do, unless if it's a consumable item and it's practical, I recommend you buy two, use one, see if it works. If it's not consumable, you damn sure better have that thing out of the package. You better make sure it works. Like I've got a Solo Stove Light that is my backup camp stove to the MSR Pocket Rocket, which is what I carry in my pack. And those are in fact backups to the big Coleman 2-burner, which is what I bring to, when the whole family has to eat. It takes a long time to feed 3 people off of a tiny little stove like this. But that Solo Stove, it's caked up in carbon. It's been used. I have personally used it to boil water, to make coffee, and to make a mountain house. I wanted to know if it worked. I wanted to know how it worked. I mean, we have to get out of this mindset of, I bought the thing, I put on the shelf, I'm prepared now. We have to get out of that mindset because gadgets with no real use make prepping pointless. And this is the last thing. And this is the one that drives me the freaking craziest. I'm going to tell people out there, and I promise this is going to strike a really sour chord with somebody. No skills and no knowledge makes prepping useless. Have all the guns in the world and no knowledge of how to use them in a self-defense or a tactical situation, the guns are useless. Have all of the food but no knowledge of how to cook it or prepare it, or no ability to do that without modern utilities, it's all useless. I go down any rabbit hole y'all want, but if you don't have the skills and the knowledge to utilize the gear that you're putting away for a really bad day, all that stuff is worthless, and your prepping will fall flat because the weakest link in this chain just became the fact that you don't know how the hell to use it. All the tourniquets in the world, all the quick clot in the world, without some basic medical training, is absolutely useless. And I could almost say I am guilty of this to a small degree because a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my skill set is relying on my time in the service. And a lot of that knowledge is now 15 years old. It might have been superseded by more modern techniques or more modern equipment. I know it works. Does it work as well as something else? I don't know. That's my failing. That's where I need to get out and start recommitting myself to training so that I can see, has a knowledge gap grown in 15 years where the things that I've done and I know are no longer appropriate to deal with problems. I
Mhm.
think I'm not that far off, but I know that from talking to like Tommy and my sister and your uncle and you and your aunt and a bunch of other people that know more about medical than I do, I know that a lot's changed in 20 years. A lot's changed just in hemorrhage control and trauma.
Well, I mean,
And you get much outside of like, gunshots, legs blown off, I'm out of my elements, not what I was trained for.
look at CPR. I'm a CPR instructor, and the big thing that like they're pushing now is like before it was, how many breaths to how many compressions. Phil, do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know what you're talking about. Wasn't there recently like discussion about like basically if
Well,
you're by yourself, screw breathing for them, just keep
yeah,
focusing on the chest compressions?
yeah. So it's 30 to 2. 30 compressions to 2 breaths. And now, and the way we teach it and stuff is, hey, if you can do a breath, okay, do a breath, but that'll make you feel good inside, kind of thing. But it's being taught now, and it's being pushed to just stay on the chest. Stay on the chest, do compressions. When another person gets there, if they can provide rescue breaths, okay. But the time, basically the research I saw on it, and I'm sure maybe when Randy gets a hold of this episode, he might text me and say you're stupid and you're wrong. I don't know. But the research that I saw on it was the rescue breaths were basically doing nothing, and actually performed wrong could actually do harm.
So
Uh,
over torquing the neck, you mean?
well, you could. If you over torque the neck, but if you don't if you don't position the airway correctly, you're going to push air down in their stomach, and that's going to cause. It may not be like, and it may not completely cause death right then and there with it, but it's just going to cause issues for the patient. And you can avoid that by, let's just stay on the chest and do the high quality CPR that is needed, because pumping that hard is a lot more important. So yeah, and hopefully none of us find ourselves in that situation. But the skills, like, we need to build on our skills. Every time I take a firearms class with Trek, or with one of his cadre, I'm learning new skills. That it's funny how many people that are like, when I go into a lot of these classes, especially like beginner, like basic handgun, the "You Suck It's Not the Gun" class, where they break it down to your sights, your trigger, your stance, even more in depth than basic handgun. But you realize, hey, I'm doing this wrong. I've been shooting my entire life. Why would I need this? But I found out that on pistols, I found out that I like the blacked out, no dot at all on pistols for iron sights. I found out that because in one of the classes I had, I think it was the "You Suck It Was Not You Suck It's Not the Gun" class, the pistol I was using had the tritium sights on it. And yeah, they weren't doing anything because it's daylight out, but there's still dots. And I found out that I was actually shooting high. Why? Because when I'm lining up, let's see if I can do this without, when I'm lining up the sights and I'm going, making sure everything lines up right, I'm taking that dot and I'm putting it up top. And so the top of the dot is flush with my rear irons, and instead your front sight the post should be flat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was that doing? That was raising my shot up. Trek comes over, looks at it. He goes, "Hold on one second." He grabs a little paint. He grabs a paint pencil or a paint pen, blacks those out. My shots go from here down. Like, it was crazy to see that. And that kind of crap right there. Like, and that's why, like, a lot of my pistols, either I've blacked out that sight or the dots, or I bought blacked out sights for my pistol. And that stuff right there is stuff that I never really knew on my own, but because I was seeking out new skills, I've I got new knowledge basically. And that's where we all need to push ourselves more is push yourself to learn something new. Push yourself to go out camping and do and learn your what works, what doesn't, and learn about yourself. Hey, I found out that I'm a mosquito magnet when I go camping. So I don't know. Like, okay, well, how do you mitigate that? Well, a smoky fire for one, that helps. Or better yet, pack bug spray,
Cigar smoke.
cigar smoke. Yeah. So, it's certain things that you want to do, and it'll help you vet your gear, it'll help you build knowledge to where when someone else, when you meet somebody or you have a friend or whoever's and they're getting involved and they're like, hey, so I was looking at this really cool thing on this, and this, and you can say, nah, don't do it. Why? Well, you can give them reasons of why the product does not work, and then you can help them build those skills and build that knowledge around products that do work and that will save their life.
Yeah. But
Because
like I said,
prepping, we're prepping to save our lives and the lives of our loved ones that are around us that we're responsible for. So, what's a better way of saving lives than knowing, how to do it properly and having the proper gear?
yeah, and like I said, this is something like I get really frustrated about, and I try to mitigate, tamp down that frustration when I'm talking to somebody who's guilty of this. But like, there is no replacement for knowing how to use your gear. And like I've talked about prepping in the past. Like a lot of people have this misconception that like everybody that preps or is a prepper, they're just paranoid, they're scared of everything. They prep because they're scared. It's fear-based basically. And that again, there might be some truth to that for some people, but I've said time and time again that prepping gives me this sense of calm and confidence in an emergency because like I've thought about these emergencies. I've mitigated them already. These are not, yes, they're life or death, they're serious, but it's not like, oh my God, what do I do? It's, I've already rehearsed this. I've already planned for this. I've already prepped for it. I have a plan. I'm going to follow the plan. And when the plan falls apart, I have to improvise. I'll start improvising, but until the plan falls apart, I'm going to execute the plan. I'm going to go for it. I like, it doesn't matter if the plan is as simple as the fire alarm goes off, I got to get out the house. You already know where the meetup spot is, how to exit your house, you know where your exits are, you know all that. So it shouldn't be like oh my God, what do I do? I'm freaking out. I got to run around like chicken with my head cut off. It's just I know what the plan is, execute the plan. When Hurricane Ida flattened this house, once the winds died down and we knew we weren't, we did, we knew that we made it through the night, we had a couple of things to deal with. We had to immediately assess whether or not our vehicles were drivable, so we knew if we had bug out options available. And that was like number 2 on the list, right behind general welfare, to make sure everybody's fed and given water that morning. And then it was assess the vehicles. Then it was assess the house. And then it was, okay, we've assessed the house, we've assessed the vehicle, we're not in a situation where we have to immediately evacuate. We need to stabilize the house. We need to start working on the brush that's on top of the house. Like, it was the moment of fear was when all hell was breaking loose outside the house because it was a Cat 4 hurricane that slammed into us that we really weren't expecting to come our way, and we were not expecting to be as bad as it was. That was the moment of fear because there was nothing we could do in that moment except for pick the most central part of the house where we had as little of a chance of flying debris and broken glass, the strongest part of the house, and ride it out. But once the storm passed, once we got to the next morning, there was no fear. It was just, we've got to do this, and this. Let's go. And my wife and daughter were right there on board. It was all things we talked about. It was things we had prepared for. Like, all the stuff we had, all the food, all the water, all the whatever, was only useful because we had a plan in place for how to utilize it. It was only useful because we made sure it worked, except for the generator that was misbehaving itself, and that's been fixed, and the lack of a chainsaw, that's also been fixed. But like, we knew that we had ways to boil water. We knew we had ways to cook even when the water service got interrupted. We had prepared across the board to deal with food, water, absence of utilities. Like, we had all these different things lined up. We prepared across the board very evenly in a balanced fashion. And like the very first thing we talked about, real world threats, down here on the Gulf Coast, there is no more real world threat than hurricanes. There's no more real world threat. You will not make it to age 10 in this state without evacuating for or riding out your first hurricane. It's gonna happen. But you have to make sure that when it does happen, you're prepared to deal with the problem, you're prepared to mitigate it, take care of your family, take care of yourself. And that all just comes from planning ahead, having the knowledge and the confidence to use the gear that you've put away, make sure the gear is appropriate. And like I don't know another way to put it. Yeah, the title of the episode is Prepping is Pointless. It's the most clickbaity thing I could think of. But there are times when prepping is pointless. When you don't do it right, it is pointless. It doesn't help. It will screw you up just as bad as not prepared at all. So these are cautionary notes. These are the things you don't want to do because it will make your prepping not work.
Yeah, no, I agree, 100%. So that being said, get out there and prep.
Please do. And if you don't know what you're doing, and most of us didn't know when we first started, reach out to somebody that does know. Contact us at the Matter of Facts podcast. Get into the Facebook group. Come check us. I mean, there are very few people in our listenership who would not happily offer the knowledge they have to help out somebody else.
Yeah,
There are very few. We all want the same thing. We all want to see people better able to take care of themselves.
yeah. And then if you don't know anybody or you don't know where to start or whatever, I mean, it's gonna be it's like opening up a faucet and just drinking straight out of on high, wide open. But go to prepper camp. You're gonna learn a lot. You bring a notebook and a pen, bring extra pens, pencils, whatever. You are going to learn a lot. There are a lot of classes, and the knowledge and they're only an hour long or 45 minutes long or so. The amount of knowledge that is dropped in these classes is crazy, and how much they fit in 45 minutes is nuts. Like it's a good time. Yeah, it's a good time. I'm bummed that I'm missing it, but hopefully next year, if my plan goes to work, or if my plan works out how it should, I'll have a lot more time to do a couple more trips. So,
And this year, my wife and daughter are coming with me for the first time.
well, next year they're gonna have to come too.
Yeah, I was actually sitting down with my daughter at the dining room table, like circling all the classes she wants. She's got a literal full day of classes picked out.
Nice.
And the funny thing is, a couple of days ago, she kind of waffled on me and said she didn't really want to go. And I was like, well, it's a little late to make this decision now. Because I'm going and mom's going and you're not staying here by yourself, so you got to come with us. But I sat her down today and we started picking out classes. She was like, oh, that looks fun. Oh, this looks fun too. Oh, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that too. And by the time we got done, she's literally got a full day of classes picked out.
Nice.
So we're going to see how this works out, her maiden voyage to prepper camp. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. Yeah, I will miss the people that cannot make it this year, but it's going to be a good time like it always is. But you got anything else to throw in before we roll this one out?
No, just get out there, use your gear, learn some new skills, and practice and train. The biggest thing is train.
Yep, and add to your tribe. Make friends. There is, no matter how long you've been doing this, no matter how good of a A-plus prepper you are, there's always somebody out there that knows more. And Andrew and I are fortunate to know people very, very well that regularly either put us to shame or fact check every third word we say and tell us, hey, you missed this and you didn't say that right and this and the other. I'm talking about one person from Texas in particular who beats my brains out every single episode. And he's in the Matter of Facts group, and I love having him around because he's a font of knowledge. He knows a lot of stuff. He just won't admit he knows a lot of stuff. But it's just one of those things. You got to add to your tribe. You got to add to your knowledge base. You got to train, and you got to approach this from the perspective of these are the things I have to do to take care of myself and not get sucked into the social media side of prepping.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, podcast heading out the door. Say goodnight.
Good night.
Bye.